It's Wednesday, July 27th. I'm Adam Walsh. Welcome to CrossTalk. It's a health accord call to action, a livable and predictable basic income. Today, we're looking at that. What would a guaranteed basic income mean for you? And do you think we should have one here in this province? The lines will be open. I'm Adam Walsh. So in June, Health Accord NL released a 262-page blueprint that outlines 59 calls to action to improve social determinants affecting health, provide more timely access to healthcare, and create a more integrated, inclusive, and sustainable healthcare system. One of those calls: ensure that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians have a livable and predictable basic income to support their health and well-being, integrated with provincial programming to improve food security and housing security. Today, for the rest of this show, we are talking about that. And the question I'm asking you, what would a guaranteed basic income mean for you? And do you think we should have some form of basic income here in this province? The numbers to call in are 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can tweet us at CBC CrossTalk or send us an email, crosstalk@cbc.ca. So I've got two guests that I'll be introducing. My first guest, it's Floyd Marinescu, Executive Director of UBI Works. Floyd, thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Tell us about UBI Works to start, if you could, please.
Right. It's a nonprofit that functions as a kind of like a marketing agency to promote basic income, promote digital activism, get Canadians engaged, taking actions, talking to their MPs to promote basic income in this country so we can end poverty and create a better economy, a better world for all.
How did you get involved with this? What were you doing before?
So I ran and still own a business. It's a software developer education company. We have large events that we organize for engineers in San Francisco, New York, and London, and a news website called InfoQ for software engineers. And being a bit of a technophile, I could see what's been happening with the labor market. And when I heard about basic income, I was kind of enthralled. I'm like, wow, we can have a market system, freedom, all these things, and also have no poverty too. Why don't we already have it? And a bit of my own background, I grew up in a house with domestic violence, and if my mom had a basic income, it would have changed the power dynamics, given her more leverage, more opportunities to do what was best for her. And I recognize basic income as extraordinary, as an emancipatory tool to change power dynamics, whether it's power dynamics in the family, in the workplace, with abusive employers, but allowing people to pursue their potential. And I decided to make this a big focus in my life, and I've been funding UBI Works primarily from the proceeds of my business, as well as we have a few hundred other small donors, and just decided that this needs to happen. I don't see how we can have a decent world that doesn't include a basic income at a minimum.
Can you give us a little basic income 101 for the audience? It's something because it gets tossed around a lot, especially like I mentioned there. We had it in the Health Accord. It gets floated from time to time from different organizations. So I guess just for the purposes of this show, if we could just start right with the basics, then we can move on from there.
Absolutely. A basic income is an unconditional cash payment received monthly to the individual or to the family unit. It is generally measured at an amount that's intended to reduce or eliminate poverty, based on various measures of poverty. People have heard a lot of words, UBI, Universal Basic Income, GBI, Guaranteed Basic Income, GLBI, GLI, lots of different acronyms. What they all have in common is money for those who need it to escape poverty, buying time for people to pursue better outcomes in life. And, generally the two bigger distinctions are whether it's universal, if everyone gets the same amount, including those who are wealthy, who will pay it back at tax time, or if it's guaranteed, meaning it mainly is targeted on an income level, income tested to those who need it. Very important distinction that even a guaranteed basic income being targeted by income is still unconditional because it's only conditional really on income. It's a tax policy, and there's no behavioral response. You don't have to fill out any forms or wait in any lines. It's just money for those who need it so they can better themselves. Yeah, so that's the basic definition.
Yeah, so like you're saying, universal, everyone gets it, but if you're in a higher income bracket, you'll pay it back with taxes. Guaranteed, it's targeted depending on income levels, and it's a different approach. But at the end of the day, the point for either which way you're going to do this is the same thing.
That's right.
I want to bring in my other guest. So, Floyd's going to be with us for the rest of the show, and I'll come back to you shortly. But also we've got Josh Menchions, the founder of Accessible NL on the line. Josh, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Adam, thank you so much for having me.
Tell us about, before we get into basic income, just can you tell us a little about Accessible NL and how you founded it and why?
Sure, yeah. Accessible NL is an outreach community program that I started, I think about 3 or 4 years ago now. I started it because I was frustrated with the lack of accessibility in St. John's. At the same time, I was starting my comedy career, and I had to bring my own little ramp with me just to get into the venue to perform my comedy. So after doing that for a couple of weeks, I knew something had to be done. I wasn't sure how to go about it or who to reach out for. So I decided to start Accessible NL as a way to get the community together to try to solve some of these problems and point out some of these accessibility problems. And through that, I ended up making my own business called The Birch Incorporated. And I co-run that with my business partner, and we renovate commercial and residential spaces to be more accessible and inclusive.
All right. So all that there, and now talking about basic income. So whether it's through looking at your own personal life, people in your orbit, or through Accessible NL, what are your thoughts around having a form of basic income in this province?
Well, like Floyd said, it will be a really good way to reduce or bring people above the poverty line. Not just people with disability, but everyone in general. Now, when it comes to it, living with a disability, depending on your disability, it ranges. Your living expenses can be quite expensive. For example, buying a electric wheelchair. I use an electric wheelchair, and I know, even with insurance, they are still really expensive. Excuse me. And other mobility devices such as walkers or canes, or even if you require medication, all of that costs more money to do, even if you have to renovate your home in order for you to live in it comfortably with your disability. So UBI would be a real help for people in that situation.
You were listening to CrossTalk. I'm Adam Walsh. Today we are talking about a form of basic income for Newfoundland and Labrador, guaranteed or universal, one of it, or some form of basic income. I want to know, what would it mean for you? Do you think we should have some form of basic income here in this province? My guests are Josh Menchions, founder of Accessible NL, and Floyd Marinescu, executive director of UBI Works. If you want to join this conversation, the lines are open. You can call us 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can tweet us at CBC Crosstalk or send us an email at crosstalk at cbc.ca. We've got a tweet from someone here who's saying, talking about basic income and the importance for her. She says she's a single senior in her 60s, has a disability. She's not adequately housed. She also says, I'm extremely hungry and I'm wholly unsafe. This is me. It's killing me. So this is a tweet that just came in, highlighting obviously the seriousness that for people who live in, whether it's precarious housing or cannot have an income that is sufficient to live off of on the day to day. Floyd, I want to go back to you. What are your thoughts there? And we can then push through into more questions I have you for the conversation.
Well, I think it's a very sad situation to be in. And I don't think anyone in this province or anyone in the world for that matter, should be in such situations. It's just not right. These people need help in getting out of poverty and out back into the world. And it's just really unfortunate and sad to hear people that are stuck in this situation. Whereas I believe UBI, excuse me, UBI, say for example, you get extra $1,000, hypothetically. Those $1,000 a month would be a lot for people in that situation and will benefit them greatly to uplift themselves out of that hard spot.
All right, Josh, thanks for that. Floyd, what do you think about the tweet, and then I've got a couple extra questions.
I think basic income is worth, even if it's a small amount, it has an emancipatory value that's worth more than the amount. It's the fact that it's predictable, the fact that people can expect it to come in, they can make plans, they can make arrangements that work for them, more so than any government program could possibly do. So the amount obviously matters, but even a small amount really matters.
So how does your advocacy work? How does that can you lay out how that kind of functions across the country for the types of discussions and what you're doing to get interest and to get people to kind of glob onto this and think, and politicians especially, to say, hey, this is policy we need. How does that work?
Right. So we've been operating now for over 2 years, and we're trying to fill in a gap that we see in the movement, because there are a lot of other groups. A lot of them are focused more on direct one-to-one lobbying, and we see our role as spreading the right research narratives amongst the population and encouraging digital activism. So what we've done is we've researched. Just before that,
yep.
Fundamentally, the basic income is an election issue. I think a company has to run in it. A party has to run in it and win.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, well, what are the actual talking points that they're going to need? What are the obstacles they'll face? And let's unblock whatever those obstacles are. So one of the obstacles are the fact that it's often only discussed within the context of poverty, and those debates have well-worn political tracks. So we researched and found, for instance, that basic income would create 600,000 jobs across the country and add to GDP as much as Canada's pre-COVID tourism and hospitality industries combined. So we needed to make sure that political candidates, parties, are armed with this kind of information so they can show that this is also a form of economic infrastructure. It's not only an anti-poverty program. If people have more money to spend, they can afford to upskill, train for better work, negotiate better pay, then everyone is better off. So that's one example of research we did, and we spread it across all the parties. We had a number of lobbying meetings, but we work with Canadians. We have 60,000 emails on our list. And every month we have a new activist action people can take, which usually involves emails going out at a click of the button to their MPs, to their councillors, to their senators, spreading these talking points, asking them to do things. So the majority of our work has been on this sort of digital activism, also making sure there's a very big visible presence for Canadians who support basic income. We have the largest social media channels. Our posts regularly get many thousands of likes. So if you're an aspiring candidate thinking to run for MP or within your party, it's important to see visibly all the support there is in Canada and our social media channels help to accomplish that. And so we've been counseling and providing resources to various politically interested people who need information, need research done wherever they ask for it. We have no political party affiliation. We pressure all the parties with our list, with the Canadians who want to support that. Fundamentally, we've been more on the sharing narratives, doing online media to keep Canadians engaged with the idea, and inviting them to do small steps of digital activism to ensure that their MPs and their political parties continue to hear, ongoing basis, month after month, that Canadians still want a basic income.
You're listening to CrossTalk. I'm Adam Walsh. Today we are talking about guaranteed basic income. What would it mean for you? Do you think we should have it here in Newfoundland and Labrador? The numbers to call to join the conversation, 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can tweet us at CBC CrossTalk or send us an email, crosstalk@cbc.ca. We've got Stephen Sims on the line from Corner Brook. Stephen, thanks for calling the show.
Hello. I'm of two minds on this, leaning slightly towards against it. Everybody forms their own opinions from their own experiences, of course. And
sure.
For me, it was, I had a workplace injury, and it was 6 years before anything was settled there. This was in Ontario with WSIB, but I'm sure it's a similar system here. So, I mean, that was 6 years of poverty. I couldn't even get any sort of social assistance in that time either, because I had some savings in the bank, so I had to spend all of that before, whereas if I owned a $400,000 house and didn't have anything in the bank, I would be eligible right away. So it's kind of a strange system.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, okay, so for people like in that circumstances and all kinds of circumstances that you can think of, certainly money easily available, obviously, would be help them out of time, not only financially difficult times, but even possibly dangerous times, right?
Yeah.
Then on the other side of that, when I was going through that system, I found a lot of people who were just blatantly abusing it, bragging of abusing it, and I think a basic income would be terribly abused. I think people would be working under the table while collecting it. And so you go back to, well, you have to have a system to monitor that. Well, how's that any different than having a system to ensure that people on EI are actually looking for work, right? You've kind of come full circle on that.
Yeah, so you've got some questions around how it will work. You're worried about wastage. You're worried about spending. You're worried about those types of things. Well, there is one more aspect, and I'm not sure if you want to tackle that first, or should I add it now? No, well, how about let's go through the first one. Stay on the line, because I want to put it out to my guests here just for their thoughts. Like Floyd, you're listening to Stephen there in Corner Brook. He's worried about wasted money, possibilities for fraud. What do you have to say to that in terms of how you think it should work and could work and would work for people across Canada?
Right. Those are very valid concerns. And I also want to speak to the first point he raised, that it's kind of crazy that in the current system, you have to lose absolutely everything before you can get support. People who may have had middle-class lives, whose jobs were lost to automation or some sudden globalized outsourcing, literally have to sell and lose everything before they can qualify for any support, because it takes time to retrain. It takes time to pick up and do something new. And this actually happened to my father and uncle, who were manufacturers in the manufacturing sector in Ontario. And when that industry imploded in the early 2000s, they had to choose lower paying work. My dad actually had to retire, and my uncle became a building superintendent. Because you can't just retrain for a new technical skill overnight. It takes time. So basic income would solve for that by providing support now, so you can actually still maintain a decent standard of living, buying time as you seek better alternatives for yourself. Imagine if CERB wasn't done that way. Imagine if the government said, all right, here's this pandemic, all you guys just spend what you've got, sell off your houses, and you can wait for the social assistance system at the end of the line. It would have been insane, ridiculous. But that's how we're treating people, and it shouldn't be that way. On the points about tax evasion, I would say that tax evasion is tax evasion before or after basic income. There's always going to be some bad apples who just don't want to work, but that exists right now. And who would want to hire those people anyway? At the end of the day, I think when this has been studied in pilots around the world, the data matters more. And on the aggregate, in the long run, overall, the amount of incidents of people working less is extremely small. It's statistically almost insignificant. It's mainly been students who stayed in school and mothers who stayed longer on mat leave. We've actually seen evidence in the pilots that people work more when they have a basic income because they have the means to afford to buy what they need to retrain or to start a small business. So I would say that just like any benefit we have, there could be abuse, but look at the benefits in the long run, and is it worth it to finally end poverty, where the vast majority of people can better themselves and don't have to be in poverty. I think that's worth the trade-off.
All right, thanks for that, Floyd. Stephen, before I get back to you, I want to check in with Josh. Josh, do you have any thoughts about what either Floyd or Stephen are saying there?
I kind of agree with Floyd there, and I also do agree with Stephen a little bit. There are going to be some bad apples, for lack of a better phrase, that are going to abuse the system no matter what you have. But our current system, for example, our welfare system, now I'm no expert on this, so please correct me if I'm saying wrong, but from my understanding is, when you're in the welfare system, you get a set amount of money, and if you gain any more money past that, even if it's $1, you lose that money. So with UBI, from my understanding, wouldn't have that. There are no strings attached to less bureaucracy. You didn't get it because you are a Canadian citizen.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I believe, yes, there's always going to be someone that's going to try to abuse it. You're never going to completely eliminate that. But I feel that the benefits of UBI greatly outweigh the negative benefits.
Yeah, and we've done stories, whether it's CERB clawbacks, social assistance clawbacks, that type of thing. So, Josh, you're right there. We have done stories around that. These are things that can happen. Stephen, go back to you. Thoughts on what you're hearing? And also, I know you had another point to bring up.
A lot of that makes sense. Systems will always be abused. I mean, how much more will it be abused if it isn't sort of a system where you're having to show work reports or whatever? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of studies. But the one thing that was mentioned about people working more when there's basic income, I'm surprised at, and I don't know. I'll have to research that. Most of what you learn has to do with your own experience. So, for me, once I finally got some benefits from the SAB and was able to be off work and get some physiotherapy and recover, and it was extremely difficult for me to go back to work, mostly mentally. I had a period of terrible depression, and if it wasn't for an opportunity dropped in my lap, I may have easily just never worked again. And I think there's this idea that if people have this basic income, they're going to feel self-actualized and autonomy and follow their dreams and all this kind of stuff. And I don't believe that's always true. I think I think money can be a great motivator. Mm-hmm. Some people who just take a job to pay the bills can end up being in a job that they love that leads to something else, and then they, they're not, sitting at home playing video games is what I was doing, right?
Yeah, and you're right, Stephen. For everyone, I mean, it's like, we all live life. We look through our own personal lenses, and things are different for everyone. And, you've given us a lot to think about. I appreciate you joining the conversation today.
Thanks for letting me have a talk. Okay, bye.
Hey, call in anytime. Take care, Stephen. Stephen Sims there, calling from Corner Brook, and I'll go back to my guests now. And also, I will say, we're talking about guaranteed basic income. This is CrossTalk. I'm Adam Walsh. That's our topic for today. If you think we should or shouldn't have it here in this province, some form of basic income, give us a call. Or if you've got thoughts on what it could mean for you, those around you, the numbers are 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can tweet us at CBC Crosstalk or send us an email, crosstalk@cbc.ca. Josh, any other extra thoughts there from what Stephen was saying?
No, that's about all I had to say. I do think, let me back up a bit. No. Sorry.
No.
All good. I understand where you're coming from. And it certainly is a lot to take in and a lot to learn about. But I'm still on the UBI side.
Yeah, no, you're still squarely with the some form of basic income, so UBI. Right, so Floyd, back to you. Any extra thoughts there, just for Stephen's parting words?
Yeah, I really appreciate Steve sharing his lived experience. I want to comment on, again, the incentives. the end of the day, we're talking about money. That means incentives. And with the guaranteed basic income or universal, you make more by working. So incentives are there. Even if someone wants to live on a poverty level salary, it's not easy. And you could work part-time. You could work full-time and make double, triple, with basic income remaining a work supplement. A lot of people don't understand this about basic income, that it's actually a supplement for the working class as well, depending on how high the benefit amount is. So let's say in one common scheme I hear discussed, you could be having a job for $20,000 a year, and you get another $10,000 in the difference in basic income, and it reduces slowly as your working income increases until you don't need it anymore. So I think it's a travesty that 2/3 of people in poverty are working. They are working. So basic income is not just a way out people in poverty. It's basic dignity and the ability for people to participate in this world, in this economy, who are working. Because our job market has fundamentally changed. It's not like in the 70s and 80s where you could work at a gas station and afford a family on a single income and a vacation every year. Things have changed. Like automation, which is sort of my sweet spot, has already has already reduced the quality of lower income work, and of middle income work has been shrinking. The middle class is shrinking, and we're growing out the lower income jobs faster than higher income jobs. So this is real. So without a basic income as a supplement to give people hope, to give people a leg up, even working people are suffering. But the key point to address Steve's comments is that you're always better off working. And whether an opportunity falls in your lap or you're looking for it, that's no different now versus then, except that to what Josh said, with basic income, at least you're not disincentivized. You don't lose your welfare checks because it's not welfare. You don't lose it when you work. You lose it slowly, a slow clawback, so that you still have a supplement to your income when you're working, and you're still better off financially by working. So the incentives are all there to encourage work, whether there's work around or someone is depressed or in a funk in their life. There's other social supports for that. There's nothing to do with basic income.
Let's go back to the phones. We've got another Josh coming on the show right now. Josh Smee, CEO of Food First NL. Josh, thanks for coming back on the program.
Oh, anytime. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, happy summer. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind in terms of, I know this is well within your wheelhouse, so what's on your mind in terms of some form of, basic income?
Yeah, and this has been a great show. I really appreciate you hosting it. I just wanted to flag there. I think there's a lot of interest from out in the community from organizations who work with all sorts of different populations. So there's if folks are listening and haven't checked it out, there's a Basic Income NL, and basicincomενl.ca has a working paper that a bunch of us drew up to try and cost out and work out the details of basic income. So obviously, like Food First, we deal with food security, and for us, a basic income would be transformative. It would be probably the single biggest thing you could do to change the food security situation in this province. But I think this conversation has been really good to highlight some of the wraparound benefits of basic income in terms of people's stability and the opportunity landscape it can open up. The predictability of having it there is really important. We do a lot of work with folks who are supported by our range of different social supports, and it can be just the amount of stress that puts you under, and the amount of people who sit in judgment over you these days, if you are relying on some of those supports, is really intense. And so I think that's one of the biggest arguments in my mind in favor of basic income. But I just wanted to highlight, I think there's a lot happening in this province in this space, right? There's that working paper. We got basic income recommended in the Health Accord twice. There's lots of work, and I think if it's going to happen anywhere in Canada, it might be here first. And so it's really nice to hear this conversation happening. And
Josh, before I let you go, for people listening, and I know we've talked about this before on this show, but when we talk about food insecurity in this province, we talk about the food security situation. Paint the picture for me, for people, just where things are at this point now. from where you are with Food First NL?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we don't have updated post-pandemic data, but we do know that the rates of food insecurity even pre-pandemic were very high. Upwards of 1 in 6 households. That's before the runaway food price inflation that's hit in the last little while. So I think any realistic projection is that we're way higher than that, and that's certainly showing on the ground right now. And we know that food insecurity is primarily a matter of income, and it hits single-parent families, people of color, Indigenous folks particularly hard. And that's, I think, one of the reasons this conversation is so important, is because right now there's just an incredible gap between what people are bringing in and what they need.
Josh, thanks so much for calling into the show. Appreciate it as always, and enjoy the rest of your summer. In case I don't bother you before fall.
Thank you. Thanks for having this show. It's great.
All right, buddy. Bye.
Bye.
Josh Smee there from Food First NL. We still have time. We might be able to fit another call in. If you want to get involved with this conversation, 722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Tweets at CBC Crosstalk. Emails, crosstalk@cbc.ca. Floyd, I want to ask you again. So the big part of the discussion here is if we're going to do some form of basic income, the look goes towards Ottawa for paying for it, right? Whether that's some kind of a pilot program or it's some bigger thing. What's the dollars and cents argument from what you've looked into for how this can work?
So it's generally seen that the federal government would be a better initiator of the basic income as a primary funder, because it has more tools at its disposal for raising revenue than a province does. But a province certainly could go it on its own. But at the end of the day, there's political realities, and the kind of taxes and the kind of systems that the federal government has access to makes it a little easier if this were to pass nationally or in some partnership, even with a single province. But on the dollars and cents, one of the most frequently touted basic incomes and numbers that you hear senators and MPs talking about is based on the one that was tried as a pilot in Ontario, which was later canceled by the Ford government. That actually activated me as an activist. I was just on a sabbatical for my business, and I was really pissed off, and I decided to do something about it when that happened. And I organized 120 Canadian CEOs to sign a letter asking Doug Ford not to cancel the pilot. And then I started UBI Works after that to try and move this forward. But the pilot that was tried in Ontario, the Parliamentary Budget Office said it would reduce poverty around the country by 50%, which obviously we like 100%, but 50% would be an incremental objective that I think would reduce a lot of the problems that we have that are linked to poverty, like food insecurity, like increased healthcare costs, increased crime. It was actually shown in some pilots that basic income would reduce crime by 42%. And even in Canada, a police chief, I believe it was in Orillia, Ontario, said that CERB actually reduced crime in their region. So I go off on these tangents because I'm very passionate about basic income. But the gross numbers for that particular pilot style basic income, which was, I believe, was about $1,700 a month for an individual, or was it $1,600? And 17,000 a year paid monthly for individuals, or 24,000, I believe, for couples. We reduced poverty 50%. That would have a gross cost of $85 billion and a net cost of around $51 billion. If you replace a number of the cash flows in very similar programs that reach the same population with this more unconditional method, and those are more the obvious federal and provincial ones. There's a lot further you can go to reduce the net cost with other additional programs that are cash oriented. But let's just assume it does cost $51 billion. Part of the research that we looked into with the Canadian Centre of Economics Analysis is that a basic income would actually grow the economy by more than it costs, because it improves the function of the economy, it improves spending, and you could actually finance a basic income. One of the ways you could finance it initially is through half or even more of debt, which reduces slowly over time because of the economic growth impacts of basic income. That would pay that debt back off consistently over a 10, 15-year period until it's only funded by new revenues, eventually that have been created by a basic income. But let's say we were to pay for it all $51 billion. It's very realistic. $51 billion is, That's like less than 6% of total government spending across federal, provincial, and municipal. We could do that. And at UBI Works, we put together a plan that shows how we could pay for all $51 billion based on in a way that doesn't cost working people. It probably wouldn't cost very much for anyone who's making under $100,000 or $150,000. And we could reduce poverty by 50%. The taxation changes would fall on the financial sector, on passive income type of benefits that big corporations get, reducing subsidies for large corporations, as opposed to changing the corporate tax rate. We don't want to do that. That could affect active businesses. And some subsidies used by the wealthiest. And so we can make the argument that a base income won't cost the majority of working people, and we can reduce poverty.
I want to check.
So it is very realistic.
Thanks, Floyd. Josh, we're getting towards the end of the show here, but this is something you've advocated for, Josh, when it comes to some form of basic income. How will your advocacy continue here on out?
Well, I get a lot of it. It's just spreading the word, letting people know what it is and making sure they understand and make decisions from there. It's known that, unfortunately, there is a lot of people that don't really understand exactly what UBI is or how it could benefit us. And there's so many different ways to implement it, whether to add it on to our existing programs or to get rid of the existing programs in order to pay for UBI. So really, I'm just going to be advocating by spreading the word and making sure people understand.
Josh Menchions, founder of Accessible NL, thank you so much for being one of my anchor guests today. Floyd Marinescu, Executive Director of UBI Works, thank you as well. Thank you both for your time and your expertise and your opinions on this topic. It's much appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me, Adam.
Thank you.
All right, cheers, guys.